Meeting of March 31st. Hopefully everyone knew that it's today since it's right before spring break. We usually hold them on the first week of the month. Anyway, this meeting is being live streamed and recorded for later viewing. I'm going to turn it over to Acting Superintendent Megan Schaefer.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. This is, as Ms. Robinson mentioned, the April Policy Committee meeting, though it is being held in March. We have a number of items to review today, though nearly all of them have been reviewed by the Policy Committee in recent months. So it would be a refresher for most of us today to take a look at the ones that are on our agenda, beginning with those that are proposed for adoption. We also, if we have time today, want to talk a little bit about the potential transition of policies over to board docs and the status of that project. We talked about that I feel like it was maybe 6 months ago, maybe it was longer than that, and what the status of that is. So again, if we have time to do that today, we'd like to give you that update. So at the top of our agenda are those policies that are proposed for adoption. I'd ask that Mr. Roos give us a brief overview of items A and B as they're sort of related in terms of the revisions that are made to them. Also C as well. If you could give us an overview of those this morning.
Sure. These are policies that were not only have been approved on a first reading basis and discussed at length at the last policy, well, not at length, but discussed more in depth at the last policy committee meeting. These are also policies that were revisions that were generated by an agreement with the Office for Civil Rights, and these policies have been submitted to and approved by the Office for Civil Rights and pertain to 114. The revisions are all in blue, and it pertains to some additional procedural protections relating to Section 504. And particular, noting on page 3, students with disabilities being given an equal opportunity to participate in co-curricular, extracurricular, intramural, or interscholastic activities. 124 is this similar language that tracks that. If you look on page 6 of your packet and page 2 of the policy 124, regarding making sure that programs of co-curricular and extracurricular activities ensure that students with disabilities have an equal opportunity to participate in those activities. And 136 is similar, is also recognizing the rights of home education students to participate in district programs and activities. Actually, that's not one of the policies, though, that was covered by the Office of Civil Rights agreement. Happy to answer any questions. No change. There are no changes since the first read, so right. They're ready for adoption.
The home education policy was changed as a result of change in law.
That was a result of changes as a result of Act 55, requiring, and that's, you'll see the more substantive change there is to the regulation, and that has to do with when students who are homeschooled want to enroll in what's called a co-curricular activity. There's an opportunity for them to participate in the academic component of that co-curricular activity.
Are there any questions? I'll give you guys a second to go through it.
I feel like I asked my questions last time around.
And for the record, we have a quorum now.
morning. My name is Eric Lowry. I'm here to speak about the policies you're talking about here right now. In February of 2022, my then 7th grade daughter was on the girls' basketball team as a manager player at Welsh Valley. She was invited to go to the last game at Radnor. My daughter has epilepsy and requires emergency medicine if she has a seizure lasting 5 minutes. This has been written into her IEP since 2014. Unfortunately, the head of health services, Terry Quinlan, and my daughter's special education teacher both thought they weren't required to include a nurse on the bus trip because it was hard for them to find a nurse. The reason for many of the proposed policy changes before you is because I filed a disability discrimination complaint with the Office for Civil Rights. Because of that complaint, the district chose to sign a resolution agreement rather than let OCR continue their investigation. One of the 3 requirements in that agreement was for OCR to review district policies with regard to Section 504, non-academic activities, extracurricular activities, and field trips. I listened to the March 3rd committee meeting regarding the same topic. I heard the district solicitor talk about the policy changes, and when he said nothing in the policy revisions change anything the district is already doing when it is feasible and possible. I take issue with that statement. The primary reason you are revising these policies is because OCR required the district to do so. And OCR is requiring you to do this because of my complaint you didn't provide IEP required nursing support for my daughter. I take the solicitor's statement to suggest that nursing supports only need to be provided for a disabled child when it is feasible and possible. It is appalling that you are being advised in such a manner when the IEP includes language that is required by law. My understanding of an IEP is that it is a legal document and the services included in that IEP are required by law, not subject to some administrator or legal counsel deciding if or when it's feasible and possible to provide. The reason you're all sitting here making these policy changes is because one of your senior nurse administrators and a special ed teacher appear to think it was optional to provide legally mandated nursing services. How can a legal document include information that is optional for the district to provide? The resolution agreement requires the district to provide the revised policies to the administration and staff. I look forward to seeing how these policy changes get communicated to the entire district administration and staff so that they are re-educated regarding these policies, nursing supports, so all kids can have equal access. The OCR agreement is available publicly on the OCR website, and I will be submitting my statement to the community comments so that all board members may see it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm just pulling up the agreement. Again, I just want to point, this was an agreement. This wasn't a finding. There was no finding of any violation by the district. This was an agreement the district entered into. And I believe what I said was, this doesn't change if it was me, that it wasn't that I said that this doesn't change anything the district is already doing. I said this doesn't change basically any of the rules that are in place for the district. This didn't make a, I have no personal knowledge as to whether or not there has been non-compliance with any of these, any rules, but the point is, the policies are no different, the policy changes are no different than what the policies of the district always were.
I mean, in terms of the next steps, in following the agreement that was made, we have continued and always do talk about nursing support for all types of activities that our students are engaged in. And we will continue to ensure that we are compliant with the policy and the agreement that's in place as we move forward. So we are moving forward with that understanding as a district. Any questions? I think we're ready to move forward. The A, B, and C are ready to move for full board adoption this next month, April. The next set of items under first reading, the first two, 235 and 246, are can be taken together as we've been discussing that 235 will, moving forward, the idea was to move the discriminatory harassment, bullying, and hazing under the umbrella of the Code of Conduct policy, which is 235. And so that is reflected in this revision. I know that we've had conversation about making sure that we don't lose sight of where that's located for individuals, families, students, community members that may be looking for that specific policy. We'll make sure that there are connections to 235 and maintain that clarity. The other piece of 235 that I did want to point out, which is on page 45, restrictions on use of electronic devices. We certainly have had a lot of conversation about cell phone usage in particular, and the idea here was to build in some language that strengthens. I'll back up. We've always had language that says if you engage in disruptive behavior, which cell phones almost or often become that disruptive behavior, there's a consequence for that. We felt it was important to call out specifically cell phones as a device that we have some authority to regulate in the school environment. We have language in our handbooks around that, and what we're trying to do is, again, provide that explicit authority that's been reviewed and authorized by the board, so that we can just be more explicit about what those expectations are in the school environment as they create. We're finding that they often become the source of either the distraction, misbehavior, and just to say it out loud, we can only do so much. A lot of this is also happening off our watch. What's happening on devices comes into school inevitably because there's some impact. So this isn't intended, nor can it really control that piece of it, but I think it's worth saying that it's not just about what's happening during the school day that we're concerned about, but for the purposes of this policy, we want to make explicit about how we can control what happens within the school day. We do need some revision because this is the administrative regulation. I want to take it back again and work on it, but I would ask that we consider language that is more universal in terms of the restrictions and default to the handbook provisions about how those restrictions can look in the school environment, because I think it's a little bit different by level, K-12, and it might be more efficient and effective to say it that way, though I think there's some universal pieces of it, like approved as part of a required academic coursework or a good faith effort. I think those are more universal, but there are some differences that either we need to build in a little with more clarity here, or make it as a by reference to the handbook where there are already rules set in place. But I do like, and I would keep on page 46 the language around what authorities teachers have in the classroom, because I think that's what they need some empowerment to regulate within the classroom environment, and I think that's important. So all that being said, I'll take whatever questions you have. I know I threw out a lot there.
I do have one minor things that I think we need to add in Black Rock Middle School. Yes. And number two, but I'm curious, I support the idea that teachers may require students to store cell phones sort of separately. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering though if in situations where that may already happen, if typically there is parent or guardian push back on that, like that they want their child to have access to their phone at all times?
Not to my knowledge that that's happening where there is currently a practice, because you're right, some teachers do that already. I know we briefly touched on that concern that we typically hear, which is it's a safety feature for families to know that they can get in touch with their child, which is why we know that it's going to take a larger conversation if we were going to go any further beyond just saying, you can bring it to school. Like if we were going to say you can't bring it to school or we're collecting it at the door, I think we would be having a lot more community engagement around that. That we're just simply saying, if you're bringing it in, here are the restrictions. And I haven't heard, though it's a good question, I certainly have shared with staff, generally this is the direction we're headed. I haven't heard that feedback from staff, though.
Thank you.
I also, there's a few things I was noting. The allowable dress. One thing that I thought was missing from here is safely moving throughout the school. And what made me think of that was the middle school my daughter went to. They were not allowed flip-flops because of dangers of walking up and down the stairs. I don't know if that's still true, but that's something that's not really mentioned here, and unless that's something you're thinking the handbook would take care of as far as the differences in levels.
I'm sorry, where are you?
Non-allowable dress. And the page 45, yeah, sorry. I was just...
Oh, okay.
I believe this tracks the handbook language, but I'm going to check right now.
Yeah, okay. And then the other thing was the electronic devices, number F3. When approved as part of regular academic coursework, does that include when kids are in clubs? Like I'm thinking about newspaper or somebody's making a video for a club. Do we need to expand that to include a reference to clubs?
I think we can add some clarity there. I think the intent was to talk about the academic day, but you're right, we can make it clear that that was, we might have a different, we can extend that scope.
Yeah, because I'm thinking the newspaper could be doing a story on something and they've got their cameras out and taking pictures of things and.
Right, especially with some extracurriculars meeting during lunchtime,
Yeah,
right? So that would still be within the confines of the day or the parameters of the day at
Yeah.
some point.
yeah. Okay, and that was all I had.
Yeah, I would just add there is some additional language around the dress code in the handbook, but I don't see anything specific around footwear. But I can check in with schools just to see if there's a practice that they're enforcing.
I was thinking
that.
more of general, unless it's like something that would create a
Like a safety issue,
It's a
yeah.
safety, it's a safety issues for moving throughout the school, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so to be clear, that the dress code part of that's to be refined anyway but the F3, it's when approved. I think it should say when approved by a teacher or activity sponsor, as opposed to just, they can be self-approved. And as part of a required academic casework or school-sponsored activity. Okay. I don't want to overlook, though, the part about where the current policy 246 has been incorporated into this as well.
Yeah, do you want to
Sure, I can
walk through that, please?
As part of the consolidation of policies relating to students' rights and responsibilities into policy 235, that way everything's in one place rather than having to flip around, it was deemed appropriate, made sense to have policy 235 on discriminatory harassment, bullying, and hazing, rather than being a standalone policy, simply be incorporated into this one. And you'll see that beginning on page 11 of the policy, which is page 34 of the packet, and you'll see that on Regulation 235-2, beginning on page 57 of your packet, page 11 of the regulation. Nothing has been changed, it's just been relocated there. So there's no changes to be made.
Can you remind us when we last reviewed that?
I can look it up, sure. Give me a minute. They're currently under construction.
So relatively recently, October 2000.
It was, this is 246. I'm looking right there. Last reviewed on 10/19/2020,
Thank you.
or revised.
Would it make sense here also to reference the student handbook? I'm guessing that the wording is a little different in the student handbook than it might be in the policy or the AR.
Yeah, I think what we need to do is just confirm our landing page on the website is user-friendly, because if we're going to keep, I'm looking at a place where it's clear this policy didn't go away, it's connected to 235, and if you have a situation of harassment, bullying, and hazing, here's what you do, and here's some just more simplified language. We do have that in the handbook. I'm just trying to think of ways to cross-reference.
Yeah, it's,
We have
it is
multiple
not
handbooks.
it's not in the handbook, it is in the handbooks.
That's what I was going to say, we have
There's
multiple
more than one.
handbooks. Yeah, that's, exactly.
So in our packet, we don't have all the attachments for 235, right? We just have E, F, and G? The new ones from the bullying and anti?
That's, I believe that's correct. We just added the attachments that related to the move that we made, just because there were no revisions and it's also a lot of paper.
Yep.
So that was the decision that was made. But we
Okay.
can- If there's a question, we can
No, I
definitely
can
pull it
review it
up.
online, yeah.
Okay, so there were no, just to be clear, that there were no revisions to those attachments.
Thank you.
The attachments pertain to like the the discipline classifications and extracurriculars, and that's, so.
Are there any other questions about this?
So what I just said is for the proposed for adoption, when we bring it back, we'll bring back the whole packet with all the attachments.
The entire student handbook.
Yeah, it's
Well, you're not going to be adopting, no, you're not going to be adopting the regulation. You're just going to be,
No, it's,
I'm just.
for us to review, I agree, you're right, we're not adopting the regulation.
So I just want to make sure I understood what Ms. Schaefer said. When you bring to policy committee next month, the policy to be recommended for adoption, you're going to bring the entire regulation back to the policy committee. It's not going to be brought before the board at a board meeting.
Ready to move on? Okay. The next item is our student wellness policy revision, which is item C under first readings. We've talked about this a number of times, I feel like, at this committee regarding the vision of student wellness and reframing it in a more holistic way. The existing policy is more of a compliance-based policy around nutrition, physical activity, et cetera. So we've been working, and Kristen's really been helping in leading the work for us. Our wellness committee, together with a subcommittee, have been drafting this and also sharing it in different places for feedback. On page 84 of your packet, that purpose statement really centered us in framing the policy from there, and we did get a lot of feedback on that purpose statement, and I think it reflects, again, a more holistic look at student wellness. This led to the creation, or the beginning of a section of definitions, which we think is important, so we have common language around this work, and then finally a delegation of responsibility section, which you'll see on page 86, which is intended to, again, anchor the administrative regulations in that direction of expanding the framework of wellness and accountability for the district. What you'll see on page 88, which is the administrative regulation, is right now basically reflects the current policy. So we didn't, in this transition phase, what we wanted to do was keep the compliance pieces that we needed to keep, so we moved them into the administrative regulation, so that's where that lands, but we're going to continue to do work around the administrative regulation, but we feel pretty good with where we are on the policy side. Last week, we met with the Wellness Committee, the full committee, and got their feedback. Again, it's been a really enjoyable process, getting a lot of voices involved in this work, helping us frame it. How do we think about this moving forward for the district? So I feel we're in a really good place, and certainly a really good place to start. There's probably more work we can continue to do around this, but the goal was to try to get something across the finish line this year that allows us to work, embed this in our work over the summer and, continue it into next school year.
So I have a question on the policy piece around the delegation of responsibility. At the end of the second paragraph, it says additional members may be chosen by the board. And is that to mean like additional members, like the type of member, as opposed to an actual person? And if so, I think we should clarify that, because I cannot think of other examples of committees in the district where the board identifies specific members, and I I personally don't think that's an appropriate role for the board. I think that, these are district committees, and so it should be district-driven or superintendent or designee-driven.
That may be some legacy language that has been in there for a while. We can double check that. And certainly I don't think it's a requirement to have. This piece, there are some compliance pieces about having a wellness committee. So that, I think this language was in there previously. But we can, I think, remove it if that would be, because I read it to mean like you could identify, the board could decide they would like additional representation.
Specifically a school social worker or something like that.
Exactly,
Right.
that's the way I read it, yes.
Okay, I would like to have it clarified that it's not that we're going to identify specific people, but categories or positions or something like that. Categories more than positions, you're right.
Do you want to just say additional members may be chosen pursuant to the administrative regulation, and then put the specific language in there? Or who do you want to have? Let's suppose you decide that you want a new, the committee's not big enough. They come back and say, we need more people. Who do you want to delegate that appointment and decision-making power to? Do you want that to vest with the board, or do you want it to vest with the superintendent?
It should rest with the superintendent.
Well, then I think then it should say additional members may be chosen pursuant to the accompanying administrative regulation then. And that gives the superintendent a mechanism by which to make additional appointments.
So that leads to my next question. On page 90, or page 3 of the AR, specific to that, under the Wellness Committee, it doesn't say who's on it. So
Under what?
it's page 90 or page 3 of the AR. And it says C, the Wellness Committee. It doesn't identify who's on it, I guess because it's identified in the policy. So then I'm wondering, can we do that in the AR if we don't say who's on it in the AR?
I think Stephen needs to have language with, identifying who's on it, who's on the committee, and a mechanism for adding additional members.
Okay.
So that needs to be done between now and next month.
Okay.
Yeah, again, this is the language that currently exists that we are working to, this isn't our new language.
Correct.
Yeah,
Right, this is not our new language.
no. And I apologize, primarily the new language is pages 84 through 87. There are a couple items that are, again, legacy language, and my apologies for not highlighting that. In the next packet, I'll do that. That was my decision, so no one else here is. I just thought it was going to be really a lot of redlining, so
Yeah.
page 88 and beyond really reflects existing language. This isn't new language. Is that correct, Kristen?
Yeah.
No, she's trying to correct me.
The new language in the AR is section F, ongoing development, and also, where did it? Yeah, so it's on page 1, and then at the end of the AR on page 96.
And I believe that was to reflect that this is still evolving work and that we're going to continue to build on that. Thank you.
So then I have a couple questions around on page 92 in the AR. Around the through the foregoing strategies and similar wellness activities, district schools shall contribute to the effort to provide student opportunities to accumulate at least 60 minutes on all or most days of the week. At the high school level, that seems very difficult to me. Like, is that, I guess that the next sentence about include physical activity outside the school environment sort of softens it or allows for it really struck me as something like, I don't know how you do that.
And maybe what we could do is just define what we mean by physical activity. I'm just thinking, are there opportunities for breaks where kids have, an ability to walk around, or I'm thinking lunch and learn being an example of that. Is that,
Oh, true.
can you count that time as being an opportunity to do that if you chose to do that? So maybe it's just about describing what we mean by physical activity broadly,
Right.
as long as it's provided time to do that.
Okay. And then the next section, I don't know. So the reason this is on top of mind for me is around the healthy start times. And the example that's often given for Radnor, how they redid their schedule and they had all their PE at the end of the day, so athletes would only be missing PE. It turns out that that did not work well for them. And so they sort of redid that, and to redo that, they actually reviewed their entire PE, how they offer it. So that probably falls more under a curricular thing than here, but that just was sort of on top of mind for me. Is that something that we want to do around the idea of, and it's complicated, like, should athletes not have to take gym? Well, athletic schedules don't necessarily, seasons don't necessarily align with quarters or with semesters, and how do you do that? Like, I recognize that it's very complicated, but I'm just wondering if that's something that can and should be looked at.
I know we have looked at that in the past about, how do we provide opportunities for credit beyond just the traditional PE class. I'm sure smarter people than me would like to engage in that conversation. I think more, and I always go back to, as we're thinking about the schedule at the high school and perhaps making, additional changes to that in light of decisions, are there opportunities for us to sit down and, rather than just shave off time, think about it differently? And so one of those areas could certainly be looking at that again, and we're in that process right now of trying to figure out that piece. So it's certainly something we can elevate as, a potential way to get at to some of those concerns at the high school level.
I don't think changing PE is going to solve the start time issues, but it was just, right, it's not. Right. But it sort of fell under here, and
I know what you're saying. A lot of people, I've heard that same iteration over and over, if that's the correct word. Why do you have to take gym if you're playing a sport? But from my perspective, isn't there a lot of units that aren't just activity related? There's a lot of information related, and and I know a unit my daughter took was CPR. So I mean, there are different things you can do. So those things would have to be considered as part of it. Yeah.
agreed. I have more? Okay, next page, 94. The fundraisers involving food. Breakfast table at Heritage. Sports booster clubs doing things with games. Although that's after school, so I guess that's not really relevant, but and I don't think Lower Marion High School has something that's similar to the breakfast tables, but I would hate for that fundraiser, and I think it struck me because somewhere I saw it say that there could be 10, and I thought there are definitely more, or there were. I don't know if anything has changed with the new activities and athletic director, but there were more than 10, and how would one then prioritize all of the different extracurricular and co-curricular programming, that uses those fundraisers as their primary fundraising source? Yeah.
I remember when did you want to talk about, when this evolved, and I don't know what the date was, but certainly from an implementation standpoint, I remember it was the day we decided, we got the reputation for killing the cupcake. And,
And the pretzel sales at lunch.
yeah, so there were some bruises from that. So to be honest, I think it's my understanding that it's tied to a compliance piece. And so we tried to structure this, it's not our intent to curb it, although we do recognize the liability piece to having food, external food coming into our school environment, allergies, et cetera. But we've tried to do our best to provide the allowance for it to continue where there are traditions and important fundraising opportunities. In terms of how do we prioritize that, that would be something I couldn't answer here today, but I certainly can get some information for you about how we work through this in just from a practical standpoint.
Thank you.
I don't know if you.
That's correct. There is a compliance piece to this under the Healthy Kids Act. Healthy Kids Act. So there's some discretion, but it's limited.
Going back to page 87, are there going to be cross-references added? Because I'm thinking the AR 101 or the policy and AR 101 are referenced, and I wondered if other
We do, you're right, cross-reference it at the beginning, so we can add cross-reference section there. And, yep.
I also feel that we had discussions about additional ways to get community input back. And I know that it was in the Wellness Committee, and I'm wondering what other opportunities there are, knowing that there's so much going on in terms of we've been asking for a lot of community input lately, and I think that when that all happens at once, you sort of get less of it. And I'm just wondering what opportunities there are for that.
We did an exercise at the Equity and Anti-Racism Committee meeting, right? Or was that the community? I apologize. So that was another opportunity to engage with the community. I've shared the purpose statement with all of our staff to ask for feedback, and we have a wellness@lmsd.org email account. I tested it, Amy, we still have it. And so, I mean, we could put it out there for that kind of feedback as well. So we haven't publicized it that way, just because we typically haven't with policy, but we certainly could. If the board policy committee would like to do that, I don't see why we couldn't announce it and say, here's an email if you'd like to give us some feedback.
We could do that at
That's a good idea.
our next business board meeting when we do the committee updates. We could just add in a little something about that.
And out to all the school newsletters, I guess.
Oh, yeah, in the school newsletters.
I would like to, in terms of thinking about the feedback loop, which is certainly something we already have established, that was, I think we set it up in connection with the Wellness Committee formation. So what we can do, in my mind, is announce that we had more engagement with the drafting of this as we have in some other cases like the equity policy, like the TGD policy, where this has been a collective effort. So I feel like we have a lot of voices in the work so far. So I'm just, the challenge of making sure we get all of the input before it gets a final reading and incorporate that. I just want to manage our expectations about how to do that effectively. So I think we can open it up and see what comes in and take, account of what we have in front of us the next time we look at this and decide whether it's ready to go or whether we want some more time to consider that feedback. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to administrative regulations? George, yeah, George is up. This is, both of these items are Mr. Frazier's, and I'll let him take it away.
Good morning. This is 137. This is specific to one-to-one devices, which are now district-wide. Basically, we're trying to clear up some of the language around lost, stolen devices, damaged devices, and insurance. Keeping in mind that these documents go home and parents reference them and they come back and they will say like, hey, it doesn't say that. So like we're just trying to clear up some of the language in here. For example, and this is recent, this is new this year, the insurance company wants us to provide a narrative for how a machine gets damaged. So they're no longer willing to just simply take, hey, cracked screen or bent frame. They want an actual explanation of how the screen became cracked. So that's an example of something that we added in here, as well as like the need for a police report. So like if a laptop is lost or stolen, regardless if it's lost, it still needs a police report. And we actually need the physical report, not just simply a police report number. So sometimes it's difficult getting those police reports from parents and guardians and students in order for us to submit that to the insurance company. And also just trying to clear up some of the language around the charges that we give to parents for the repair and replacement of devices. So it's this, just trying to update some of the language around that to include and explain what goes into repairing a device. Like on average, it takes about $200 of time for technicians and administrative duties to repair a laptop, whether it's covered by warranty or not. It still takes about 200 hours worth of technician time and administrative time to repair a laptop. Also in here you'll find there's a sentence in here about locking devices when they're reported lost or stolen. So we have, through some of our client management products, the ability to remotely lock a device when it's been reported lost or stolen. It depends on the device. In some cases, we can actually lock the device altogether. In other cases, I'll lock the browser, as an example, to give incentive if the scenario warrants for that device to come back. So there's a number of changes in here, but they're all pretty much pointed at the repair of the devices and what goes into that process and what we can do as a result of a device being reported lost or stolen.
On page 1, page 3 of the hand, the extras bit. It says by the manufacturer's warranties. What is their average what is the warranty on the devices that we hand out?
So it varies by device, and sometimes it varies by year of device. So the warranty will cover, in some cases, the warranty will cover like a manufacturer's defect, but not a cracked screen. In some cases, the warranty is accidental damage, again, depending upon the year the device was purchased. So that'll cover the cost of repairing the screen. Doesn't take away from that $200 that it costs us to diagnose, process, and ship it and get it back and re-image it and give it back to the student. It just pays for the cost of repairing the screen. So, but the warranty varies by device. It varies by what's damaged and what needs to be repaired. And if it's not covered by warranty, we can try to submit that to the insurance company and try to get a reimbursement for that, but that's when we need that narrative from the student or the family explaining how the device got damaged.
Do we take out AppleCare on the Macs?
We do. But again, it varies by year, and it varies how they're purchased. So there's years where we have accidental damage, so that it pays for the parts and the repair of the machine. Doesn't pay for any of our work involved in getting it there for repair and getting it back and whatnot. So.
AppleCare being sort of the same thing as like an extended warranty? Kind of?
Well, just to tease that out a little bit, like when I think of extended warranty, I think of like it comes with 1 year, but we're buying 4 years as an example. So as opposed to like accidental damage warranty, or just a warranty for manufacturer's defects. So there's a couple different flavors in there. We buy these devices with 4-year warranties. Keeping in mind, we're going to go into a 5th year, so there's going to be, when they're their oldest, we're not going to have that warranty. But also, there's accidental damage repairs in that, and I think that's what you're asking.
Yeah, thank you, that's helpful. We're going into a 5th year because we're starting the MacBooks in 8th grade.
I'm sorry?
We're going into a 5th year.
That's new. We're trying. So that started last year. Last year we bought for it was rising 9th graders and rising 10th graders. So we bought actually 2 years, two grade years, because we were going to try to get 5 years out of the 8th grade laptop. So this is our 2nd year buying for 8th graders. I think that's right. This is our 2nd year buying for 8th graders, and we're going to try to get 5 years out of those. I mean, the Apple devices are generally good. They're pretty robust. I mean, the students do damage them. We've had 832 Apple laptop repairs so far this year. Maybe some teacher laptops in there, but primarily student. But we've already had 832 Apple laptop repairs this year. In fact, we've had of student devices, Apple laptops, iPads, Chromebooks. And again, there might be some teacher ones mixed in this, but we've had almost 1,200, 1,191 repairs so far this year. So it's a lot. I don't think people realize the logistical tail on maintaining the one-to-one program.
Thank you. Helpful that the senior year is a little shorter.
Yeah.
And they check out.
Questions about that?
I don't know if you wanted to mention, there's no change being proposed to what the district is actually doing. It's only conforming the AR informed to what is actually happening. Wasn't sure if that was clear.
Yeah.
On page 5 of the separate handout, it says manufacturer's defect. Just, my eye was drawn to it. At the bottom, it says normal wear and tear of manufacturer's defect.
Oh, yeah.
There's an R missing.
There's an R missing.
There's an R missing.
It's what?
It's just a misspelling, there's an R missing.
Okay.
And then on page 7, number 8, when we're talking about requiring the police report, until the student or parent or guardian obtains that report, they don't get a replacement.
No, we do. We try very hard not to in any way impact the educational process. So we give them a loaner. It does vary by situation whether or not that device goes home or not. But we ask that it stay on campus until all those things are satisfied. But that I can't say that that's 100% all the time.
So just so I'm clear, is the police report required on all damage or is some damage or lost? Sorry.
No, we only ask for the police report for lost or stolen. So if something's lost, it's eventually considered stolen. So you could clearly remember leaving it on the bus and getting off the bus. You left it on the bus. If no Good Samaritan tries to return that to you, they kept it, it's now considered stolen. So eventually everything ends up being considered stolen. And we need a police report for that.
Thank you for the clarification.
Sure. We do need narratives though for everything. So.
When it says when device are lost and they must report it to the police department, so they have to do that first? Because before they report it to the school? Because that's what the order I was just wondering about.
Well, we do ask that they report it to the police as quickly as possible because like sometimes it happens in different jurisdictions, like the kids like will take it on vacation with them or they'll take it on family trips with them and they'll lose it wherever they're traveling. So we do ask that they submit that where they are. But if there's a question of order, what do you?
I was on page 11, and I just wondered if we should, when device lost, the student should first report must report the loss. I don't know, some kind of language that says must first report the lost or stolen to the police department or something. If that clarifies any question of who do you contact first. I mean, as I know, if I was in that situation, I'd be wondering, my inclination would be go report it here first, but not necessarily, and I don't.
The only reason why I would, and I don't know how often this will be applied, the only reason why I would suggest we keep it in the, and this wasn't by design, but the only reason why I suggest that we keep it in the current order of contact the police first is because we offer an email address that they can email when it's lost off campus, but if that happens over a weekend and they're waiting for a response to that email before they contact the police and they come home, it becomes much more arduous for them to get a police report when they've left.
Yeah, and that's what I was wondering, if we should clarify that there, just so they know that they should immediately and before contacting even contacting the school to report it lost or stolen to the police. So in stressful situations, our brain's not always working.
So just to clarify, you wanted to add the word first? Yeah. When a device is lost or stolen off campus, the student or parent or guardian must report the lost or stolen device to the police department immediately where the device was stolen, or first where the,
Yeah, I'm not sure first.
Can I, suggest, I like should immediately, but first I hesitate with, because depending on the circumstances, I don't want it to be like they don't report it to us when they could. Just because the order, to me, one doesn't have to precede the other, but to say the immediate, like, should immediately report it, makes it sound like that's the
I think
preferred
that,
first step.
I like you,
Okay.
where you're going with that, yeah.
So my suggestion would be to say, replace must with the student or parent guardian should immediately report the lost or stolen. Does that work? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just to clarify that point, I think you said it, so if they were on vacation, let's say they're in Ocean City and they lose it in Ocean City, it's stolen in Ocean City, they were reported to that department in Ocean City, obtain their police report, and then submit it to you.
That's correct.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah.
the two places that I don't want to be during vacation. A police station and a hospital.
It happens. Unfortunately, it happens. And rarely do we get the devices back. So. Okay. All right. Policy, or move on to regulation 832, cybersecurity and data breach response. So there's quite a bit here, and by design, I did try to keep it brief. When you read through this administrative regulation, I was trying to think of language and content that would help with the development of a security program. An information security program or a cybersecurity program is like any other new initiative. It needs work, it needs development, it needs to be measured and evaluated. So I was trying to lean into language that was more related to a security program. Now, some of it is, just as an example, on page 1, so bullet 1A underneath of scope, where it says we'll adopt a security framework. That by itself is a huge undertaking. So when we talk about adopting a security framework, we're talking about adopting a series of protocols and practices that are the real details, the granular details of what needs to be done to ensure cybersecurity is being implemented correctly. So the language is again around developing that program, but not to be fooled, there's some details in here that are years of work by themselves. And as an example, that adopting that security framework and implementing it. So I want to point that out only because if you're looking at it for something like how long should passwords be, or you know, what incident response model are we using, those come out in the details of something like a security framework. So this is more of a overview strategic level in terms of cybersecurity.
And to clarify, these are new ARs to go with the new policy that...
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. On page 4, or page 119, when it says executive management is responsible for, I don't think that's a term we normally use, so I'm wondering the definition of executive management.
Megan pointed that out just yesterday. So, whatever the preference is, we can certainly.
You explained to me that you were referencing like our cabinet team.
Correct.
So we can make it more district
Okay.
compatible language.
And also, this isn't necessarily new protocols. These are putting on paper, to some extent, some sort of synthesizing it of what already exists. Not that there wouldn't be some additional pieces to it, but it's not like nothing existed.
No, not at all. As an example, we have, it speaks to some, it speaks to things that we do have in place, yes. So we certainly have pieces in place. We have a information security analyst whose work day to day is helping to defend the district. We actually have adopted a security framework. We're still in our fledgling steps of implementing that security framework, but we have done many of these things. It really what we need to move beyond the boundaries though of that's an IT thing. Like we need to get the whole organization thinking information security, and then hopefully that comes out in this document.
I just wanted to give credit where credit is due, right? So to acknowledge that there is a lot of work that is going on, has gone on previously, and that it being a new AR, I didn't want people to think like, oh, all of a sudden we're going to start doing these things. A lot of these things already exist.
No, God bless you. There has been a lot of work done over the years to improve our information security posture.
In terms of I know for the one-to-one initiatives, the students have to go through like a protocol of, matching a quiz and things like that about how to safely use their laptop. Do the employees also have some sort of initiation that way?
We do have required phishing training. So it's a short video. It's a 4-minute video that employees are required to watch. And it's about identifying phishing videos, recognizing that phishing is 82% of breaches or incidents start with a phishing email. We specifically targeted phishing email as our training to help try to reduce that primary method used for compromising organizations.
I mean, before even doing that, I mean, you did some testing to see
We did.
district vulnerabilities in that area. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of work that's been done to, I think, focus the type of training that George is describing to ensure that it's what we need as an organization based on those types of tests. Is that fair to say?
Very. We did conduct our own phishing test. We phished our employees. And we found that we need training. So this year actually is the first year that training is required for all employees. No, we did not.
Do we also, do the school bus drivers have phones that they use that are from the district or no?
They do. They have, it's basically a flip phone.
Okay. So they're not getting texts and stuff on it?
They can get text on it. They can get text on it. Another security thing that we're implementing presently is multi-factor authentication. And we're actually very happy that bus drivers have those flip phones because we can enroll them in multi-factor authentication using those flip phones. So
Sure.
They'll get a text message and they'll be able to authenticate using that.
Okay. And should there be any training about like phishing through that? Because I get texts every day about my PayPal account is closed or my Amazon account is locked.
That's called smishing. Can't make it up. That's real. That's called smishing. It's a combination of phishing and SMS. So SMS and phishing. So it's smishing. Just purely coincidental. This year, I was invited to speak to the bus driver. So the bus drivers got like a full half hour of me talking about phishing. And in that, there was also mention of phone-based smishing. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm curious about the two-factor authentication, because I know that that's like a really good thing to do, but it's also a real pain in the neck. And I'm curious, to do that, like, is there assumption that, like, do you then have a staff person's personal phone? Because it's not like every staff person has a phone. Like, how does that work, and how would that work with students? And
so we haven't implemented it with students. You mentioned students?
yeah, I'm just trying. Yeah.
Okay. So we haven't started that with students yet. We are rolling that out presently with employees. Over the next 60 days, we hope to have that fully implemented for all employees. We are asking employees to use their phones. They have a couple options. They can either receive a text message or they can install what's called the Microsoft Authenticator app. Our recommendation is the Microsoft Authenticator app. It has a couple more capabilities. It actually makes logging in easier as opposed to using the text message. But there is the option to use text messaging as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, this has been a very well-planned and executed process that George and his team has engaged in, and we've, along the way, been having conversations with our association and their leadership so they understand, knowing that there are some that might have some hesitation about using their personal devices for that purpose, but there is, you know, from our lens, it's about the importance of protecting our data, and because that is such an important piece or key to doing that, we believe that the association understands that, and as we, roll this out, we're very hopeful that, everyone will adopt that practice in the name of just the security and safety of our data. So I know George and his team have put a lot of work into this.
Yes, I'm sitting here thinking, we just finished putting together a 6-minute video introducing MFA. Certainly share that with you if you're interested. But it's me actually in this room introducing MFA. And although the production value from Mike is very, very good, the acting needs a little bit of help. There's also a video that goes along with it. And we have a whole website that we've developed for explaining MFA in the district and the value of it. So if you're interested, certainly there.
I was just looking at page 4 in the list of all the things you're responsible for. I don't envy you. I'm wondering, like with third-party logins and aren't most of the students using Google Drives? Are we forcing them to do the multi-factor, or are they just straight logins?
So presently, it's a straight login. The students have username and password presently for Google. We have not discussed implementing multi-factor authentication for students. I mean, it's certainly something that we can consider. It's certainly something that we can look at. The idea behind risk-based defense is saying, what's the most important thing that we're trying to protect, and then pointing your resources at that. So and this is that idea of like the whole organization understanding cybersecurity. So someone might say, hey, my data over here is really important and you need to protect that. But in the grand scheme of things, over here is the sensitive and confidential information that we need to protect. And given it limited resources, we need to point our resources at that. So in my department, you'll hear things like, well, what's the priority of effort? Or what's the highest risk? And we try to point our resources, money, people, at those things to try to protect those. So although you might be thinking, and I'm sure rightfully so, like, all right, well, let's help the students use multi-factor authentication as well. If their account gets compromised, the risk of sensitive and confidential information is much, much lower than, say, like Denise or LaToya's account getting compromised. Now we have a real problem on our hands because of the amount of confidential information. So we want to point our resources at protecting these folks. So perhaps after we get MFA for students, or for faculty and employees checked off, we can look at MFA for students and how to if we have the resources to point to that.
Yeah, I see what you're saying about this. It's what's the weakest link that can cause the most damage, which unfortunately can be a moving target.
It can. Right now, the data shows that 82% of compromises start with a human element. So that means a human giving up their account credentials, or that means a human reusing passwords often. So they'll have like a third-party account compromised. The bad actor will take those account credentials and keep trying to find where else they can use them. So that idea of password reuse is bad. So that's why we're focusing on that. And the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security made it really easy for us too, and said you need to enforce multi-factor authentication. So it's also come from the federal government that, like, if you want to protect your organization, this is how to do it, and it's multi-factor authentication.
Sure, that makes sense. With students, it might be just in the future good, just get them on the road to good practices.
Agree.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's an equity issue in case they don't have a phone.
Well, I mean, there's got to be ways to, yeah, I'm thinking, it does rely on your phone quite a bit, and you're right. I mean,
there are other methods to do it. it makes it less secure, depending upon how you do it. Like if your multi-factor authentication is another email account, if I have your other email account, if I've compromised your other email account, I can start picking at other things, knowing that when that information comes back to that email account, I have it.
Sure, especially if they're
So-
using the same passwords.
Right. So that multi-factor authentication is something you know, something you have, or something you are.
Yeah.
So something you know, password, something you have, your phone, or something you are, like a thumbprint. We didn't want to get into biometrics, so we're leaning into something you know and something you have.
Are we establishing any regulations for if there is a breach, this is how we're going to respond?
Yep, that's in here.
Oh, is it? Okay, I missed
And
it.
what it says is, hey, you need to come up with an IR plan. And that's what you're referring to, an incident response plan. We have an incident response model that we've actually even practiced. It's called the PICRL model. So I would love to talk about that for a while, but that's probably not a good idea. I'm on a roll here. So, but yes, we do. You're welcome.
Sorry to stop your roll, George. Can bring you back for another meeting in the future. But
Certainly.
You can teach the board about phishing and smishing and.
yes,
Would love to. Would love to.
line them up
Anytime.
after Aldous. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I just have a couple of more items on our agenda, and perhaps we can dive into the board docs discussion the next time. Just know that we are moving forward with that. There are a couple of options for us. It's not something you're going to see right away because the build time on the back end is not insignificant, but it is something we'd like to move forward with. And I think maybe next time we'll come back and just show you what it looks like so you see it one more time before we launch, and perhaps we can add something into an update so you can maybe link. I'll share that as a link to you all to see between now and the next meeting. The one item that's a review only is something we committed to reviewing annually, which is that partner school process, which we are continuing into next year with the same parameters that have been in place for the last couple of years. Those are posted on our website under our registration page with the Q&As. We try to avoid partner schooling to the extent possible. There are times, though, that's necessary. Obviously, it has a busing. It creates strain on our transportation system, et cetera. So again, we try to avoid that, but it is something that can be helpful to maintain those class size guidelines that we aim to maintain at the elementary level in particular. So this is actually only happening at the elementary level at this time. And the final, I think, just future discussion item was policy AR 007. Did you want to talk about that?
Sure, I just wanted to put it on the agenda, I think, for the fall, just to have, one is with the long meetings that we've been having lately, whether it makes sense to move our evening meetings up earlier. Our evening committee meetings are now at 7, so that opportunity, but also to look at when we hold our committee meetings, which I think actually we have more flexibility with in terms of the committee meetings, but I think that it warrants look into what other districts do and how those various times are received by their communities and how that works, because I don't think that there's a perfect time for any of it. You know, there are pros and cons to each, whether we did morning or afternoon or everything in the evening or, you know, starting at 5 like some other districts do. So I just think it would benefit us to do a little bit of research into what other districts are doing and how that works before moving forward.
Shall I summarize? Yes. Okay. All the three policies proposed for adoption are moving forward for adoption. The ARs will, assuming they're adopted, the ARs will be enacted. First readings for Policy 235 and Policy 246 amendments. Policy 235 amendments and 246 repeal, moving forward for first reading, with the associated regulations are going to be brought back for this committee next month. Policy 254 is moving forward for first reading with that minor change about the board, the additional members may be added to the committee by accompanying administrative regulation. Our administrative regulations 137 and 832 are ready for enactment as revised at this meeting, but they don't need to come back to this committee. And we've noted, that's it. I don't know if you want to just note that the 206-4 was placed before the board for review and there were no changes. So that should be, that we can check that box for 2023.
Thank you. Thank you for summarizing the meeting. The next meeting of the policy committee is on May 5th, and we are adjourned.